Alright, so that was 7 easier pieces. The Kaizo Blind Race level from July 2nd, Saturday difficulty. And if you're having a little trouble beating it yourself, I figure I can just open up the course in the editor and give you some pointers on each individual segment. So this first part is just a pretty standard little speed run of the coin dash variety. If you just follow the coins to their conclusion, everything will work out perfectly. Just keep holding right here, and then aim for that spot that's indicated with the square and the 2 arrows. And then you'll just naturally follow this coin pattern. One thing that I noticed a lot of racers doing is they would just stop right here. And I don't know, I'm not really sure why they would do that. Obviously the first time you get to this point, because the screen scrolling in the game isn't that great, you can't really see what's going on. But you have those triple arrows telling you like where you're aiming for next. And then you have this giant box with 2 arrows pointing to it that also tell you exactly where you're aiming for. And as long as you obey the pact between designer and player, the pact of the coin dash, that I will lead you correctly, and you just aim for that spot. And importantly, do not attempt to aim for the Lakitu, because their movement is exceptionally erratic, and if you try to aim for the Lakitu itself, you'll almost always miss it. If you just aim for the spot, the Lakitu will be there. So basically that's all you need to do. The next part is just a little bit of precision platforming where you just have to time your way around these fireballs. If you're wondering what the deal with these ones on the wall is, they can't hurt you as long as you're not touching the wall. So I'm 1 pixel away from the wall, so this thing can't hurt me. But if I press into the wall, now it can. So you just need to be careful not to touch the wall on this part. Everything else is just timing. The next part is the first of 3 obstacles that feature one-way barriers in kind of a significant way. And the first 2 obstacles are supposed to kind of teach you or motivate you to learn and understand like exactly how these one-way barriers work. Because a lot of people have some sort of intuitive sense of how they work but don't really understand the ins and outs of them. And so it's really important that you understand when one-way barriers become solid, when they become not solid, when you can pass through them, when you can stand on them, when you can't, etc. And so playing around with this structure right here was designed to bring players along on that journey of learning how to do that. But you're just supposed to zigzag your way through these like this. And right now this one-way barrier is solid. Why can you pass through it later? Well, you're doing a jump out to the side. And as soon as you get Mario completely outside a one-way barrier's hitbox, it becomes non-physical, right? So I can pass through this one right here, no problem. And I can still freely walk through it. But as soon as I get completely outside of its hitbox, it will become solid. And you can see there's tons and tons of leeway there. You have to actually go quite a distance outside of its hitbox, and now it's solid. And to make this not solid again, I had to go all the way to the left of its hitbox. So I think a lot of people tend to think of one-way barriers as just kind of this kind of like enigmatic cipher that they kind of have an intuition about but never really thought about. It's far easier to imagine like the one-way barrier like turning transparent when it's active and when it's not active. And if you are always thinking in terms of is it there or not, and you imagine it disappearing when Mario can pass through it, I think it's a lot easier to... Like, just imagine if the game did that for you. If the one-way barriers literally vanished when you could pass through them, and appeared when you couldn't. People would have had absolutely no difficulty whatsoever on the very last obstacle. So it's kind of up to you as the player to understand somewhat well this, you know, one of the basic building blocks of Super Mario Maker levels. Anyway, this last obstacle is the donut drop. The only issue any people had with it is if they were familiar with my donut shuffle levels and they tried to donut shuffle. Although I will say, a lot of the people that tried to donut shuffle this for several minutes were also the same people that had tons and tons of trouble with the very last obstacle. So I would say, I think those players maybe make a little too many assumptions when they're playing and don't take a moment to sit and examine like what they're dealing with and take a critical eye to, you know, the task at hand. Because if you get dropped down into an obstacle like this, and you spend several minutes trying to donut shuffle between spikes, which is insane, and you would have to assume that the designer of the level is completely insane and would task you with an unfair challenge, which, you know, I've never done in any of the race levels, and I haven't allowed any of the other race designers to do either. I don't know, I would say you're making too many assumptions and not just taking a moment to calm your mind and examine the situation at hand. Okay, this is the second one-way barrier obstacle, and you may notice I stuck you 2 one-way barriers, one in each direction, that you can freely play around with the safety of the ground below you, so you can kind of like test out the limits, see when you can stand on them, and when you can't stand on them. And again, it has nothing to do with which way you're facing or which way you're traveling. It has everything to do with where you are and where you came from, right? So this one-way barrier will remain physical until I get all the way to the left of its hitbox. I'm now all the way to the left of its hitbox. It will not become solid again until I get all the way to the right of its hitbox. So imagine it's completely invisible, it's not even there. And it won't reappear until I get completely to the right of it. Now it's there, it just reappeared. Same for this one. Doesn't matter which direction they're facing, they work the exact same way. Invisible, visible. Invisible, visible. And not only that, but I made sure I stuck an obstacle that almost everyone would for sure die on the first time. And I would say like 90% of players did this and tried to jump on this leftward facing one. And, you know, they were punished for it because they didn't quite understand how one-ways worked. But once you die here and you realize there's something I don't understand, let me examine it and figure out why I can't jump on that one. At least the hope for me was that people would begin to internalize some of that logic behind one-way barriers. And then another thing I did is I stuck this leftward-facing one-way barrier that a lot of people would be likely to fall on if they failed this next jump. So if you fail that jump, a lot of the time you'll fall directly onto this one-way barrier, which kind of counteracts falling through this one-way barrier, right? Most people die on this one-way barrier and they get it into their head that, hey, maybe I just can't step on these leftward-facing one-way barriers. But that's actually not true. It just has to do with, like, where you are and where you came from. And so if you fail this jump right here and then fall on this leftward one-way barrier, that will challenge maybe this incorrect perception that you had that you can't stand on leftward one-way barriers. And I was hoping that would kind of, guide players toward discovering the correct way of thinking about one-way barriers. And of course you just hop all the way back over on the boot. It's a lot easier if you don't stop while you're doing it. Okay, the second to last obstacle is a donut shuffle with 3 donuts. I had a donut shuffle with 2 donuts in my previous race level, and that was a Friday difficulty. This was kind of just a throwback to that because this level uses the exact same sort of structure, and also just to show people, how much easier it is with 3 donuts. I expected all of the people that had messed around with the 2 donut version to have very little trouble with this, and that by and large was the case. But if you've never seen this before, you're just supposed to shuffle back and forth on the donuts while the P timer runs out. And despite me just failing it 2 times in a row, it's not all that difficult. Now the last obstacle was the one that created so many bad feelings. This one was kind of meant to be funny. Like, I didn't make it to Troll, but, you know, there's a lot of parallels to my Friday level in this particular level. And this is another one. In the Friday level, this obstacle, the very last obstacle, looked very similar. It had conveyor belts. If you tried, like, running against the conveyor belts, it didn't work. I mean, you actually couldn't even run against the conveyor belts. You were Big Mario and you were trapped against the conveyor belts, and you had to fight their motion. You had to figure out some way to overcome the conveyor belts so that you could make it to the left side of the obstacle before something stepped on this music note and dropped a muncher down to kill you. So in the Friday version of the level, you just had to do really good crouch jumping to the rhythm of a metronome that was built into the level. In this one, you're just supposed to hop on the vine and then literally mash left. And that was kind of a joke too, because you know, everyone called the conveyor belt room in the Friday level the button mashing level, so I figured, hey, why not actually give everybody a button mashing room, just to be funny. I thought it was, you know, a funny call out to the room from the Friday level, and also just a way to poke fun at all of the people that had called the previous room a button mashing room. Anyway, now here is the final little bit of the obstacle that caused so much people trouble. Because it's not immediately obvious how you're supposed to pass through this one-way barrier. If you internalize the lessons from the previous two rooms, even if you don't know exactly how to pass through a one-way barrier, like the first thing that should come to your mind is, I need to get fully to the right of its hitbox, and then not go to the left of it. And so the first thing you might try is something like this. I'm now fully to the right of it. The problem is if I go down this vine, the wall will actually push me to the left. You can see that in this position, I had not gone fully to the left of its hitbox, but in this position I am. The wall pushes me. You can see Mario get shoved over. And now this is physical. But you have this vine down here that you can also use. And it turns out if you just come down here and switch to the right side of the right vine, you're now fully to the right of that one-way's hitbox again. And there's also no wall down here to push you the extra couple pixels to the left. So if you just swap over, you can freely avoid this saw blade, and this one-way barrier is not physical. If you swap all the way over to the left, it becomes physical again. And the other thing is, if you're just standing here pressing against the wall, that's not sufficient. You don't get far enough to the right. If you press up in this position, then you will actually be in the correct spot, and now the one-way barrier is invisible again. So basically no technical challenge here. I can understand why a lot of people got a little salty about this, but this was just kind of supposed to be a thematic cap on the level, and also I thought the button mashing in this room was so easy that I wanted to just give a little bit of a minor puzzling challenge, just to challenge people to put their learning from the previous two one-way barrier rooms to the test and solve this little mini puzzle, if you will. I know this, you know, the Saturday races aren't the puzzle races, but I thought it was fair because there's so few elements for you to interact with. There's, you know, so few things you can actually do that if you had actually just, like, gone down a list of what, like, resources do I have at my disposal and what can I do with them? Like, you have a vine, and that's it. The only thing you can do is try positioning yourself on a couple different positions and see what works. And in the race, the people that got just by far the saltiest were people who just came to this obstacle and said, I don't know what to do, what am I supposed to do? And then they just kept trying the same thing over and over again. Like, a lot of people just kept doing this, as if they expected the behavior to change. But, I mean, I don't know. I think, you know, a lot of people say, oh, this isn't a Kaizo obstacle, or this wasn't even a Kaizo level. But, you know, Kaizo isn't just shell jumping. In Super Mario Maker, Kaizo means something a lot different than it did 10 years ago when Kaizo Mario World came out. It basically just means any difficult obstacle that, challenges you to do something slightly unusual. And the best Kaizo players are the ones that, remain calm under pressure. They don't get salty. They have the patience to, if they miss a shell jump, to get back up and try it again. And they also have the calmness and the presence of mind to examine an obstacle and understand how they're supposed to interact with it. And if you look at this obstacle and think you're supposed to somehow jump over the saw or something, that doesn't even make sense. There's obviously a one-way blocking you. I kind of feel like people just were thinking, hey, this is a Dr. Cliché level and he has made crazy precision levels in the past, therefore he would be insane enough to stick an obstacle like that into a Saturday race level. So I'm just going to keep trying to jump into this saw and die over and over again. And I don't know, I think that was the wrong approach. I think people were making way too many assumptions and just letting their emotions get the best of them. And if you had just remained calm and collected and been like, what options do I have available to me? Let me test those options. You would have beaten this obstacle on maybe your second or third try, or maybe without even dying. Anyway, that's my rant. I've definitely taken into consideration how much people hated this obstacle and how much trouble people had with it. So in the future, I'm probably going to try to discourage stuff like this, but this was kind of an experiment to see if I could kind of build this learning experience into the level. I guess I failed. So I'll just be taking that into consideration in the future. But, despite all the salt in the last obstacle, I hope everyone had fun in the race. And if you haven't beaten the level yet, I hope this tutorial was a little bit of a help to you.